In this video, we're going to create some classes that are going to be needed as we get further into our development. These classes are important, and just about every single one of them will be modified in some way. But for right now, they're just going to be empty classes just to get us started. The first one we're going to create is known as a PUZ inventory manager, which is actually an inventory manager. And the inventory manager is what holds our inventory items, hence inventory manager. What this means is if we were to have collected the speed up oil can that we created earlier and actually allowed it to spawn, then this item would actually go into our inventory manager until we told it to get rid of it. That's pretty much the main gist of the inventory manager. So the point though is it needs to be attached to the pawn class that holds this inventory manager. Just as AI will also have the same pawn, this shouldn't cause any trouble. So we can do default properties inside of there. We want to do an inventory manager class equals class puzzlegame.puz inventory manager. Inventory manager class most likely originated from the pawn if you were to go back and look. Okay, so now that we have that done, we're going to move into our next one, which is our PUZ AI controller, which will extend from UDK bot. The AI controller is just like the player controller, except it's the AI's intelligence level, while the player controller was us playing it, or our intelligence. So this is where we're going to keep most of our AI. Once again, the pawn is what's going to actually be the viewing creature. It'll actually hold all the things that involve our view of how we can view the creature, but the AI controller is how the creature will react. We need to tie this into our game. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable class in our PUZ game, PUZ AI controller. We're going to call that a PUZ AI class. And down in default properties, we're going to set PUZ AI class equals class PUZ game or puzzle game dot PUZ AI controller. Unlike the other things that we've been doing, such as the player controller class and the default pawn class, which kind of exist in the parent classes of UDK games, such as game info, this one does not exist already. So we're going to actually be creating this one from scratch. So you're really going to get your hands dirty when it comes to showing how these things spawn and things such as that. So you will get a more involved touch of what the AI class is than you would, for instance, of trying to get the player controller class to spawn based off of a player start. In essence, they're actually going to happen the same way, but you're going to at least be able to write your own code on it. Okay, so after that's finished, the next thing we're going to create is our PUZ weapon, and that's going to extend from UDK weapon. A PUZ weapon basically is the puzzle weapon, or the weapons our player or even the AI might get to use. And that's pretty much the end of that. There's nothing else to do at this point, because when the PUZ weapon does get spawned or placed into our character's hands, it's going to be handled through the internal code that already exists for the most part, which is the inventory manager. Minus a few changes or tweaks that we might make. We obviously will be using PUZ weapon though to create our weapons and to tell it when to spawn certain particle systems and things like that. Okay, our next one is going to be the player input class. The player input class is a little different than the other classes because at the end of the extends UDK player input we have what's known as within PUZ player controller. What this within means is that this class is going to exist within the class that it's saying it's going to exist within. The good side to this is that if we created a variable inside of PUZ player controller, we can access that variable inside this class without having to somehow access the player controller itself, because we kind of already exist in that class. So that's one of the positive sides. You don't have to create the booleans in here or the integers or whatever variable you're creating. You can create it inside of your player controller and then access it inside of PUZ player input. You could also do the reverse, but it doesn't work exactly the same. Now, once we have that done, we need to go into our PUZ player controller and basically tie that input class to it. So we're going to do input class equals class puzzlegame.puz player input. And that is pretty much all we need to do for the player controller. Now, the last thing we're going to create is known as the HUD, and we're just going to make that class PUZ HUD, and that's going to extend UDK HUD. We go to PUZ game and we add that in with HUD type equals class puzzlegame.puz HUD. Of course, the HUD is our heads-up display, so it's going to probably show like hit points, anything like that. It might even show a timer ticking down for our speed ups. Maybe any other abilities that we might create. So it's more visual than really anything to do with the game. So once we have the puz HUD created, which extends from U to K HUD, like I said, we throw HUD type equals class puzzle game dot puz HUD in there, and that completes this for what we need to do for our game. I will briefly mention that there are two other classes that usually you would create if you're making a multiplayer game. First one is a class called player replication info. In our case, we'd probably call it puz player replication info, and that extends from player replication info. And then we have also puz game replication info, which would extend from game replication info. Those two classes are necessary when you're making a multiplayer game, but in our situation we aren't, so there won't be a need to continue with that for right now, but later we might explore that a little bit more. And that completes this video.